So quick update, we've got the rest of the screws in this aluminum angle LED mount. So that's all done. We come up here to the back side of the dash. We now have the aluminum angle installed on the back side of the dash. Right here you can see where it's notched out to fit around my GM switch, that little custom bracket we built to screw it to the back of the dash. So it's cut out to clear that, but it's installed. And now we have the fuse box installed. That's its official place. That's where it's going to live, right there. I've temporarily got the cover off of it, but as you can see, we have our 4-gauge negative and positive hooked up. There's our negative, there's our positive. Heat shrinked, matching colored heat shrink tube on the ends of all of these. Again, the little copper lugs are crimped, soldered, and then heat shrinked at every connection, everywhere there's a copper lug. These are 3/8 cable clamps, little plastic ones, just to keep everything in line. A couple of holes through frame 4 here. Through frame 4, runs on down to my remote post. There's a positive and a negative post there. Same thing, it's got the 3/8 cable clamps about every 6 inches. So our 4-gauge wire run, I think, is officially done. Here's where we connect to the post. You can see we've got the amp, kicker amp, 1000 watt mounted. I had to build this extra 4th batten across the bridge deck here for the amp mount bracket to land on. So that's the only purpose of putting this extra batten in. They haven't been filled, they're not epoxy glued on, it's just screwed there. So here's our little terminals, and then you can see the positive and negative where they split off and run up to the amp. So that continues on back through frame 2. Same thing, about every 6 inches we have those 3/8 cable clamps. And then here is my main negative and my main positive, and the excess wire where the battery will get mounted back here somewhere. So that'll connect to the battery. But that's what I was working on for the last few days, getting my 4-gauge wire run. Again, 4-gauge with a 150 amp inline breaker, because that's what the amp recommends. That's what, the kicker amp, 1000 watt amp recommended. 4-gauge with a 150 amp breaker. Now from this point, if I wanted to, I could have gone to smaller stuff, maybe 8-gauge, and ran that out to the fuse box, but I had it. There's no harm in going bigger than I'll ever need. I mean, this stuff will flow 150, 180 amp? 180 amp? And dear Lord, if I'm pulling 180 amps from my dash light, something's really, really wrong. But that's where we are. The 4-gauge wire run from the battery to the fuse box is done. This is our split off to the amp. Everything's fairly well hidden. I don't think you'll see any of the wiring. You won't see the amp, so turning out pretty dang good. Follow it on around through the frame to the fuse box. So, making fantastic progress. All right, well, we've got yet another milestone in the zip build. We now have our cable ran. This is, again, a C-Star rack push-pull cable. We've got the rack bolted on top, as you can see. What I did was I left the 3 bolts right here. You can see the slots here, here, and one over here. I left them loose, and I took that rack and tilted it, kind of pointing up, and then I just laid my cable across the top of the boat here to get an idea of how it would run. The minimum distance from the center of my helm to the outside here, I can't remember what it was, 18 inches or something according to the instructions. So I made sure when I drilled that helm hole to have at the very least that amount. It's actually a little bit more than that. And then with the cable laying on top here, hopefully you can see it, I took a Sharpie and I drew this radius on the top. So when I drilled my hole, because if I had drilled my hole at an angle, I don't think, with how long the rod is, the connection for the outboard, I don't think you would have been able to sneak that rod through an angled hole. I think you'd run it right into the side of the boat no matter how you angled it. I don't think you'd get it through that. So I drilled a straight hole. Now, according to the directions, the instructions, this should have been an 1.5 inch hole. Well, measuring across the points on the nut for the outboard tilt tube nut, it's actually 1.25 inches. You could have gotten away with 1.25 inches. I drilled it 1 3/8 so I didn't have to fight it, which is still smaller than the 1.5 inches they recommended, but plenty big enough. So then what I did was I came up from the top here and I measured, straight across, just straight across how wide this was. And it was very, very close to 1 3/8 inches. So then I just made sure when I drilled my hole that one edge was here and the other edge was out here, as you can see, my hole, so that it would make that radius through that straight hole. So this way, if I ever need to replace the cable, I can simply unbolt it from up here, drop this down in the front, and start pulling the cable out straight. And when I go to put it back in, I'll just make a big giant U-turn with the cable so I can force it back through straight. So 1 3/8 holes, I cannot tell you how painful it was to drill that monster of a hole through the frames of my boat. Oh, I had a hard time doing that. But it had to be done. I didn't want the cable to be seen. And this is how you're going to route it if you don't want the cable to be seen. So as you can see, the cable comes through this hole, around behind the deck, our Pioneer receiver sleeve, with plenty of clearance. It's actually got about a 1/2 inch of clearance at the tight spot here. So no issues running it behind the deck. It's on top of my speaker mount. So again, the magnet is substantially smaller than this hole diameter. So there's no clearance issues there. It'll completely clear that speaker. Now, because of my little support blocks here, I had to drill it in the middle of the two. So as you can see, the cable comes out, it kind of makes this little snake over to the middle. It would have been really nice to put it right out on the edge and run the cable straight all the way down. But this little tiny snake, I mean, you can turn the helm unit with my hand. So there's next to no resistance, even without a steering wheel on it. So I'm really not worried about that little snake at all in it. Again, another 1 3/8 hole, and then one final 1 3/8 hole through here. And I'm trying to decide. I think I'll probably end up going up on top here, just like the front speaker mount. I think it's the cleanest mount. And then just like it is, basically it'll dive underneath here. When I have my motor well across here, it'll be cut. There'll be a hole cut somewhere in there where it'll come out and then run right over to the outboard, the tilt tube. So, fantastic progress. We got our cable ran. And oh my goodness, I can't tell you how painful it was to drill 1 3/8 holes through my frames. But it had to be done. Making fantastic progress. All right, so we've got our RGB LED strips in there. You can see the wiring is just temporary right now. All the connections are just electrical taped to test function. But our circuit starts up here. It continues down this strip, across jumper wire. It splits to this strip and this strip, across this frame. Then it splits back to this strip, jumper wire, splits to this strip, and this strip under the dash. So let's turn it on here. We got the little remote. So there it is. That's like a teal color. It does a really good job illuminating the boat. And I'll come down the ladder a little bit and we'll look across. You can see the reflection of the LED in the side of the boat there, but you cannot see the actual lights, even looking clear down into here. So I think it's going to be pretty dang awesome. But there's like an aqua color here. We'll do like a red. Oh, that looks pretty good, yeah. Let's see. Here's a green. That looks pretty good. What do we got here? What color is this? Here's a blue. So there's blue. And my shop lights over there kind of throwing it off. It looks purple blue, but it's actually, the entire thing is very, very blue looking. Here's like an orange. That's pretty cool. Anyhow, here's a white. So there's the white color. What's this one? Oh, that's like a purple. Anyhow, there's a whole bunch of preset colors. There's a slightly different green, different blue, back to red again. Anyhow, so you've got all these preset colors up here on the top, as well as, you know, if you wanted to dim it down some, if you didn't like how bright it is. I believe it's this one here. So you can dim it down quite a bit if it's too bright, or we can bring the brightness all the way back up. And then there's some different modes in here on this remote. For instance, this one here is a Fade 7, where it'll just slowly fade through 7 different colors. There's a teal, into a blue, into a purple, there's a white, yellow. Anyhow, so yeah, it fades through them. Or you could do like a jump 7, which instead of fading is just going to be a very abrupt change from each color. But pretty dang cool, pretty cool. So anyhow, all my wiring's correct. They're nice and hidden. We'll drop down here, and you can see the LED strip there, mounted underneath my little aluminum. Let's see if we can drop down close here. It's actually still about, even with the LED strip, it's still about a 1/4 inch above the bottom of the carling. So I could have probably cheated them down a little bit farther, but I think that'll work. Pretty dang cool. We got interior lights. Of course, I have to take all of my connections back out and solder everything and shrink tube it and all of that, but just cut them all to length, to size, and got my little jumper wires cut, and so that's what we were doing, making fantastic progress. Yellow, pink, teal, white, red, awesome. So we are framing in the motor well now. You can see I've got these little blocks here, same on the back side of the other side. You can see, so they're secured to the transom frame with 2 screws, the rear cockpit seat back with 2 screws, and then each one of these motor well sideboards are secured to those blocks with 2 screws. It is 24 inches from inside to inside, 24 inches. So after we do the 1/4 inch marine ply, just like the hull is, it'll actually end up being 23.5 inches because it's roughly 1/4 inch. But I really like that narrow width, because it is a narrow width. When you turn the steering wheel hard to starboard and our steer cable extends, it'll actually bump into the motor well down here. So I'm going to cut a clearance hole and seal all of that up and add like a tube extension for that steering rod end to pass through the side of the motor well, but because it'll be a tube with the end blocked off, it'll still be watertight in the motor well. But that's what we're working on now, framing up the motor well. Making fantastic progress. So we now have this motor well support in. It's been cut. It's sitting at 12 degrees, just like the rear cockpit seat back and the transom. It's the exact same angle. We've got it cut to match the deck, the curve of the deck, and then it's also faired off at that same angle to match the curve of the deck. So that's in, glued, done. It is 5 3/4 inches from the face of this to the face of this, and when we do that 1/4 inch box inside, that'll put it at 6 inches even, and should be more than enough room clearance for my motor to tilt up here. And then something I was doing tonight, you can see these 2 big clamps here and these little 3/4 inch marine ply blocks. They're cut out to go around my big washers over here. But basically what I did was I laid a straight edge on the side of this and ran it down, and realized that I needed to bring this 3/4 inch motor board on out just a little bit farther, so there wasn't a void here when I put my 1/4 inch marine. I didn't want there to be a void there, so I cut those 2 little blocks out. You can see that side over there, so it's cut out to go around this here. But what that does again is allows me to run my sides right down here and have something to support and land on. I did not want a hollow spot back here. So that's what I'm doing today. Making fantastic progress. Once those get, once the epoxy cures up, I'll pull these clamps off, and then I think I can, you can see my drawn line across here. That's 6 inches from the top down to this line, 6 inches. So what I'll do is I'll take a 1x1 and screw it all the way across from this line down. That'll be the top of the block. Screw it across here. Same over here, there's one all the way across. And then that will be one lip that the bottom of my motor well sits on. So, making fantastic progress. So we've been framing in and boxing in the motor well area. You can see this is sticking up here. This all needs to be cut off to match. Same thing. It's that marine ply that the hull's made out of. It's Meranti, but it's called Hydrotech. But you can see the marine ply stamp on the side of the motor well. So here it is. Originally, I was going to go with a 6-inch depth here. I actually cheated that up about an inch, so now from the top of the bottom, I guess if that makes sense, it's 5 inches from this face up to the top of my transom cutout here. So 5 inches, I move that up an inch, and then this distance from the bottom here up to the top of this frame, you can see it's overlapping, but from the top of this measuring down is 6 inches. So it's 5 back here, 6 up there. And everything is, I guess you can't really see it, but I took strips of 3/4 by 1 inch, and I got my sides cut and clamped in, and then I figured out what angle I wanted to run this floor at. And I couldn't tell you what the angle is, I just did it off of measurements. But then I clamped that 3/4 by 1 to the side on each side. So that gave me a basically a bottom of a drawer to slide this bottom ply into. And I did the same thing, or will do the same thing at the back of this. There'll be another one back there that the two join together with. And you can probably, yeah, you can see it here. I put one 3/4 by 1 inch block vertically on each side so that my side walls will have something to land on. But it's the exact same concept for the bottom where it attaches, and it'll be the exact same thing where the front attaches to the bottom. Plus it'll have all this glued surface all the way around on my motor well sideboards. So she's going to be stout, but it's turning out really, really nice. And I think, I haven't 100% decided yet, but I have a whole bunch of I want to say like 1.25 inches wide by a 1/16 strips of African mahogany. I've been saving it up in the top of my rafters. You can see it right there. There's a whole bunch of it, super, super thin. I didn't want to throw it away because it was really pretty, and I thought, well, maybe I can use that somewhere. So what I'm debating is I may veneer this entire motor well with that African mahogany strips that I've saved up there. Veneer the whole thing so it's all African mahogany in here. I think it would look really pretty. And I'm debating on whether or not to do that. And since I'm in no rush and I think it would look uber pretty, I'll probably go that route. But we'll see how this looks when we get it epoxied. It should look like the outside, which is pretty dang pretty. So we're making good progress. Chugging along. Alright, so we now have all the motor well pieces back out, and tonight I have glued on my little blocks. You can see block here, and then the vertical blocks, one over there and one right there as well. So those are all sanded up. They're all now epoxied in place. They're officially there. Here's parts of my motor well sitting up here. And then down on the floor, you can see the fresh epoxy where I have glued these little runners to the side pieces. So that's what we did tonight. We are gluing all of our motor well support blocks to their structures. And tomorrow after this cures, I'll get the sideboards over here, get the clamps off, get them clamped in position up here, glue them to each side. And I can then take the bottom, slip the bottom into it and glue all that in place. And so we're making good progress. Well, it's officially May 1st, 2016. For the month of April 2016, we went up 24.5 hours. So not bad on the hours. We went up a total of $33.09 this month. And that 24.5 hours, we added 2 new categories, electrical and mechanical. So we had 7.5 hours on the electrical, we had 1.25 hours on the mechanical, and then the remainder of that 24.5 all went up on deck framing. So that brings us over to 425.5 hours into the boat build so far. And that $33.09 brings us up to $5,872.93. And again, I love months like this where I can go up, you know, a decent amount of hours and it doesn't cost me a ton of money. So great month. Looking forward to next month. We are still working on the motor well. That's what we were working on last night. Continuing on, we're getting ready to get the sides put back up in here. Start gluing everything permanently, but making good progress. Thank you for watching. Please rate and comment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, and we will catch you on the next update of Building the Zip.